Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Bianca from Riet, and I run my business, Be Your Truth, which is a mentoring and coaching business in mindset. Today, I have the great pleasure of having a conversation and introducing you to Peter Collins from Profit Maker Sales. Peter has close to... Hi, Peter.
Hi, Bianca.
Peter has close to 60 years experience in sales, and I had the pleasure of meeting Peter in 2017 when we started working together. And the one thing about Peter that's always jumped out to me is just his journey around sales, from where he started to where he is today. He's written over 72 business books, with his bestseller being Sell Like a Champion, which has been selling, bestseller for and consistent seller for 25 years. And therefore, I thought it was just really important that, we need to know more about Peter Collins and his journey, as it's been such an incredible journey. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Bianca. Life on this planet should be a lot of fun. And a lot of people get too business-like. They get so drowned down into what they're doing, they forget that there's a life at the end of the tunnel. I'm probably one of them as well. So, well, you know me long enough to know that.
Yep.
What did you do yesterday? I worked. What did you do the day before? I worked. And it just goes on day by day. And I have a commitment, because I'm in my mid-70s now. Life needs to be a lot of fun, but I also need to put a legacy together, because a lot of people have been saying, what are we going to do if you pass away tomorrow? We've got a lot of books, but the best thing that we've seen you do is put things on video, because your passion starts to come through. And I think the important thing is, I'm happy to pass on my passion. This is why I'm agreeing to a number of interviews with select people. And I say select people on purpose, because I don't want to be interviewed by Tom, Dick and Harry. And Bianca, I really appreciate all the work you've been doing with me over the years. And I appreciate, look, I think the best thing to say about you, the most important thing to say, is you listen.
Thank you.
A lot of other people sort of half listen, and while you're talking, they're thinking of the next question, or they're thinking of what they've got to say. I find you the exact opposite, and I wish a lot more people, both in the coaching and in the training area, took a leaf out of your book. I take my hat off to you.
Thank you, Peter. That's lovely for you to say so.
Bianca, the other thing I want to bring in, and thank you for bringing up the book, Sell Like a Champion, because that book is so foundational. I decided recently to put together a whole training program on video. Never been done before. The information that I provide, nobody's provided before. The access to information that I'm going to give people, nobody's provided before. There are so many firsts in this. I'm so pleased to do this. Now, this will be my first training program. And for those that want to buy this from me when it's up and running, probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I've got a special price for you. So I think the important thing is just follow what I'm doing, and you'll come out really loving what's going on.
That's great news, because I know, as you said, that's been such a consistent and bestseller for 25 years. To be able to now get that online, what a great idea.
Thank you. Now, the important thing is, you want to know about my sales background.
Well, certainly do. I believe it started around the age of 11 or 12. So let's go.
Look, it did. I got very intrigued with the selling process, because my parents at the time had a bungalow. Now, a bungalow is, what's the American word for it?
A granny flat?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
A bungalow is a granny flat. Now, what people don't appreciate with a granny flat is everybody's just like a flat. You live on each other's doorstep. And here I am watching this guy come and go to and from work. His wife was working at the time as well. And he was in sales. He was in retail sales. That's a very good profession. But he then decided back in the late 1950s to move into television sets, which were very, very new in Australia. In fact, we only got television in 1956, and we didn't even get the black and white model, because I remember when it came out, it was blue and white.
Oh, wow.
So, and they were tiny little screens, I think 10 or 11 inches, and that was a family TV set. It started to grow. By about the late 50s, this fellow called George Galt would go out and he started selling televisions, and he had a little Austin A40. Now, if anybody knows what that is, it's a tiny little car, so compact you could put two televisions in the back seat, no room in the boot because it almost didn't have one, and your paperwork was on the actual passenger seat. So that's all you could sell. And George went out, and you had to keep going back to the warehouse a number of times, especially over the weekend. 6 months later, he buys this massive American thing called a ranch wagon. I think it was a Buick.
Yeah.
And now he can fit in 6 television sets in the back. It's like a big station wagon, some big ones, some small ones. And by every day of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, it's all sold. Now,
wow.
Here's the best part. He bought that car for cash. Remember, I said that. 12 months or a little after that, maybe 18 months later, he then buys a brand new 4-bedroom house for cash.
Goodness me. Wow. That's incredible.
As a young kid, I'm watching all of this and I'm saying, I want some of that. This is too good to be true. You know, as I went into sales, I started selling, and I started selling, believe you me, at the age of 15. I went out door knocking and did all the things that I shouldn't do. But guess what happened along the way? I was the best door knocker in the team.
Yeah.
Here's something else that happened, and this was absolutely out of control. It started to rain. I'm in Melbourne. Guess what happens in Melbourne? It rains more times than there's sunshine.
Yes.
So it's now raining. We're taken off the road, and we're brought into the office to do some telephone calls. And I make a few phone calls, and this big woman, she must have been 3 times the size of a normal woman, walked up or waddled up to me and said, "You say that again and I'll sack you." Now, for those that are not in Australia, sack means I'll fire you. So, okay.
What did you say?
10 minutes later, she waddles up again and says, "You said it again. You're sacked." Now, this is what she said. "You've been saying that we'll have a salesman in the area," because in those days we didn't have saleswomen. "We'll have a salesman in the area on Saturday, and then you make an appointment. If you say we have a salesman in the area, or I'll be in your area, guess who's not going to keep the appointment? The person you make the appointment with. They've got no commitment."
Right.
And then she says, "This is how you say it. We have a salesman that needs to come out a long way to see you. He's going to have to drive probably for half an hour." And in those days, half an hour was a long drive. "And please, can you make sure you and your husband are home?" First lesson I got, you know, the interesting thing is, I'm talking nearly 60 years ago. What do I have people do when they call me? They say, "We'll be in the area. Let's make an appointment for Thursday. What time suits you? 10 a.m. or 2 p.m.
Yeah.
I make the appointment. Guess what happens? I don't keep it. Just to teach them a lesson. And the amount of people that are still doing this today is unbelievable. The amount of people that go out to appointments that don't exist is also unbelievable.
Yeah, I can say I have heard that before, where we will be in the area. So you're right, it gets used a lot of times, probably most of the time these days.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I stayed with that company for a little while. And again, I was their top producer door knocking. So I wanted to get into sales, real sales. I'd had enough of this door knocking business. It wasn't a challenge. All I had to do was just keep on getting names and addresses and putting up times. And again, I was making good commission on the side as overriders. But what happened is, no, I want to get into sales. So I start reading the papers. And I get to see this bloke because very few people would actually advertise for anybody that was new into sales to get into sales. So I went and saw this bloke, and he said to me, he says, how old are you? And I wasn't 16 at the time. And I told him, he said, well, you got a bit of a baby face, but I'll tell you what, if you learn this script, and he gives me a 16-page script, not double typed, it's single typed, and it's an 11-point type. So you can imagine how much is on that script. He says, you learn this script, I'll give you a job.
That's crazy.
So I memorized the whole lot, came back to him pretty close to a week later, and he says, okay, show me how good you are. And I got halfway through the first page of the script, fully memorized, and he says, stop. You got a baby face, you'll never make it in sales. I said, what? Don't you hear me? What I'm saying is, piss off, I don't want you. And that was my introduction to the selling industry.
After learning 16 pages as well.
Yes, but I managed to gradually get my way into it. And what actually happened is I started off working in a music store as a salesman, because for years, the thing that always fascinated me was music. And from the age of 10, I was playing the guitar. By the time I was 16, I was actually in a masterclass with a professor of guitar worldwide, a guy called Illyrio Diaz, who took over the guitar professorship from Andre Segovia. So that to me was where I was at. I get a job there and I meet a guy called Les Adams, which is my first mentor. Now, Les at the time was, I think, 56 years old, 58 years old. I'm 16. What a relationship that is.
Yeah, I can imagine, but what a great mentor to have, because he's experienced life so much.
Well, he was like a grandfather, but a grandfather that took interest in me, and a grandfather that liked to drink. And what 16-year-old kid doesn't like to sit in an office and this guy keeps opening beer bottle after beer bottle and he's sharing glass with him? Right? That was my introduction to selling. But Les was very strict, and he said, look, I'll teach you how to sell, because nobody's going to teach you how to sell. It doesn't happen. You might get onto an American company that'll give you the basics of selling, but it'll be Americanized. It won't suit what's happening in Australia. If you're prepared to listen, I'll hold you by the hand and I'll teach you how to sell. Well, I sort of listened to Les. I learned a lot from him. And in fact, my selling was improving all the time. And then all of a sudden he walks up to me and he says, you've been talking to some other people about selling. And I said, yeah, because they asked me a question. I answered it. I asked them a question. I told you never to discuss selling with anybody else. I don't want you to get misguided as to what's going on. I said, what are you talking about? He said, most people in sales don't want to give you the truth because they want to trip you up so you can't sell. It makes them look better.
Okay.
That was my first lesson to what's happening in selling. And today, if you go out and buy any of the sales training material, and you're spending sometimes $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on that material, guess how much information they give you? Maybe 80%, maybe 70%. They hold back the vital things, so you keep coming back and you keep buying more and more of their material. And if you're not happy with one, you go and buy it from another one. The interesting thing is these guys are making millions of dollars, and the one thing that people don't realize today is the information they're giving you is in a time warp. Because if they stopped selling 30 years ago and started training then, guess what material you're getting? You're not getting anything modern. You're getting material from 30 years ago, still good, but it's nowhere up to date. You're buying antique. Just imagine if you bought a 30-year-old car and you expect it to perform like today's model. It doesn't work. So that's basically what started me going and where it came from.
Right. Now, I believe that you started your first business around the age of 20.
Yeah, that's another thing that sales gave me. You know, the interesting thing is I was selling up a storm. By the time I'm 18 years old, I'm given a sales supervisor's job. I'm an 18-year-old kid. I don't know anything about managing people or what I should be doing, but I was held by the hand. And here I am making lots and lots of money. You know, by the time I think 6 months went by after I got promoted, I drive into my driveway, my father's driveway at the time, in a Jag.
Wow.
It's a 4-year-old Jag. Now, an 18-year-old kid goes and buys a 4-year-old Jag with cash. That's how much money I was making in sales. My father comes flying out of the house straight up to where I stand in front of the car or by the car, says, "Get that thing out of here. If you leave it in my driveway, people are going to think I'm making a lot of money. I don't care where you borrowed it from. Go and take it back right now." I said, "Dad."
Goodness, what an interesting response.
"Dad, I didn't borrow the car. I bought it." "What do you do for a living again?" Now, my father had been a leading hand in a major company here in Australia for 20 years at that point, and he was earning a third of what I was earning. Wow. And I'm earning even more on weekends playing in bands and things. So this guy couldn't get over the amount of money that I was making. I'll tell you something else that happened. Within a couple of weeks, he loved the car. Once he asked me if he could drive it, he fell in love with it.
Of course.
Look at what my son bought. So now he's proud. The other thing that I managed to do by the age of 18 is, because I got so involved in guitar, I wanted to get some really very expensive guitars. And I came across a brand that I'd never seen before, but it was recommended to me by Les, by the way, Les Adams. And it was called Levin, Levin. I had to import that guitar from the States. 6 months later, I had 2 very expensive Levin guitars. One was a black Dreadnought, and it was a hollow body, F-hold. And the other one was a classical guitar, no lacquer on it, was a matte finish, and it was somewhere between a very light yellow to white, because all it was just oiled over a white wood. Here I am at 18 years old. Tell me the goals don't work.
Exactly. Like, you know, it's got focus and you want it, and you know the strategy and the secret behind that, you can get it.
Bianca, I had to tell that story for one reason. By the time I'm 20, I've now put aside enough money to buy a house for cash.
Wow.
How many kids today are able to do that? And I did that basically because of the selling industry. And because of my love for the guitar, I ended up wanting to open up a store. Now I've got my father telling me, this is what you don't do with your life. You've got enough cash for a house, buy the house, and then buy more houses. That's how you make your money. I'm a 20-year-old kid. Guess who I don't listen to?
Dad.
My father doesn't know anything, does he? I'm earning 4 times as much as he is. Why is he lecturing me about what I should do? So rather than upset my father and put up with his belly aching all the time, I moved from Melbourne to Sydney, about 1,000-kilometre trip in those days. And I set up shop in a place that I don't know, in the back of back of an arcade somewhere. Managed to get a big sign out the front, start advertising in the local papers, and before you know it, I'm making sales of musical instruments out of this tiny little shop. And then I started taking on lessons. So I took the shop next door, turned it into music studios, and before you know what's happened, within a year, I've got over 350 pupils in that music store.
My goodness me.
It becomes the biggest guitar music store ever in Sydney, Australia. But not only that, it becomes the only music store that becomes accredited by the New South Wales Conservatorium of Music through the Australian Music Education Board as an examination centre.
Wow, that's incredible, Peter.
How good is that for a young kid to start building a business. I then opened up a retail store elsewhere and somehow managed to find the time between that location and the music store and did that 6 days a week because nobody was allowed to work on the Sunday in those days. Everything was closed, apart from churches, by the way.
Yeah.
The only things that were open. But as you go through what happened there, that whole thing grew so fast. I took on some partners and the partners managed to rip me off legally. They could do it. They couldn't do what they did today. And I ended up losing all my stock. And I said, well, what am I going to do with the music stores? The teaching studios. You look after them. We don't want them. That gave me good cash flow. And that's what kept me going. Now, from there, my next step was my marriage breaks up. I go to Melbourne, come back to Melbourne. My marriage breaks up. And I'm between 6 and 9. I have no idea what I've got to do next. So guess what I do? I go looking for a job.
Yeah.
I end up in the Yellow Pages and I get that job. And this is something that most people can learn from today. I found out after I got the job from the sales manager of the company at that time, the Yellow Pages in Melbourne. And Tony said to me, he said, look, there are 74 applications and there are 4 jobs. Why should I give you a job? Well, to me, the answer was simple. Because if you give me a job, I'm good enough to sell for you. And the better I sell for you, the more you get elevated. And the more you get elevated, I know the more you're going to promote me.
Love it. Love it.
He gave me the job.
Of course he did.
Now, I'll tell you what happened. Because it's a corporate, never worked in the corporate scene before. I've only worked for my own businesses. I've only worked commission only now since I started. I don't know what it was like at that point to put your hand out and get a salary or a check at the end of the week. It was foreign to me. So now I start with this Yellow Pages and they give me 3 weeks worth of training. After the first week of training, I go back to the trainer. I said, this is crap. I don't want to be part of this. So what are you talking about? I think I know what I've got to do. You want to get people with a little entry to buy a big display entry. That's what you want. He said, yeah, but you got to know how to do it. I said, I think that's simple.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, you can stick your training. I don't want to be part of it. So he sends me back.
Expect nothing less from you, Peter.
So he sends me back to that guy that employed me, a guy called Tony Knight. And Tony says, what's going on? I said, well, can't handle this stuff that you're carrying on with in the training room. It's just crap. I don't need it. I need to go out and sell. He says, well, tell you what we'll do. I'll give you some contracts to work on. What we need to do is we go to last year's buyer and we upgrade them this year. That's what our salesmen are supposed to do. And I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he says, you probably need some help with a couple of graphics because we want to put together some nice looking stuff that you can sell. So fine. So I get the art department come in. They gave me a lot of different pre-arranged type photograph things for ads and then showed me how to fill them in. I said, this is okay. So I spent the day doing all my preparation. Well, the next day, I decide to go to work and I leave home at 6:30 in the morning because my first appointment's at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
I then work through, I think I finished at 10 o'clock that night. I was nearly 2 hours late to my last appointment, should have been at 5 o'clock. I get there at 7. I then get home close to midnight and start trying to do the paperwork. And I think, no, can't handle this. I'll go back to commission selling, forget this corporate stuff. They want your flesh. They want to eat it as well. So you know what I did? I went back to the office the following morning and the company provided me with a briefcase. So I picked up the briefcase, opened it up, emptied it on my supervisor's desk and said, I'm leaving. He said, okay. Well, did you do any calls yesterday? I said, mate, I started at 7 in the morning on my first call, had to travel for half an hour to get there. Then I finish my last call at 10 p.m., get home at 11, and I worked all day. It's too much. I can't handle it. He said, show me what you've done. So he pulls out the contracts one by one and he says, "Are these signed?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I signed them properly. I think the customer signed them."
Yeah.
So he goes through and he calls in another supervisor, and the two of them are gleeing over this thing. And I'm saying, "Guys, I didn't do anything wrong. I just went out and did what I was supposed to, didn't I?" And they're carrying on. Next thing you know, the guy that employed me, the sales manager, turns up. And he's having a look at this. And he goes, "What have you done?" I said, "Tony, what are you talking? I didn't come here for you to put me down. I came here just to resign." He said, "I'm trying to pay you the biggest compliment possible." He said, "Why is that?" "We've just added up how much you sold yesterday, and it was $9,500. That wasn't a bad increase on the previous year. But here's what people don't know. When I joined, the salespeople in that company were expected to increase on last year's revenue a total of $250 on average."
Wow, what a huge difference. And that was like your first day out there going selling.
I wrote nearly 2 months worth of increase in one day, not knowing what I was doing. All right.
And also saying no to their training.
well, you know what happened? I was told to stay away from the trainer, and I would be trained by my manager, my supervisor at that time, for the next couple of weeks. Well, he didn't provide me with very much. I just wanted to get out on the road. And by the way, this is what people don't know, he took all of my figures because I hadn't been allocated a pay number and put them on his account.
Oh.
So I never got credited for everything I sold.
Oh, no.
That was a good introduction. And then we went to the country. Guess who was out there in the country with everybody else? All the new recruits. First day, I'm the first one out. I'm the last one back. And I've come back, and these guys have now finished dinner. They're having a beer or so. I haven't eaten yet all day.
Yeah.
And I took a few beers, and my then trainer says to me, "What did you get for the day?" Now, the budget in the country was a bit higher than the budget in the city. It was around about $450 per day because you could go and see more people. That was the whole concept behind it. And he said to me, he says, "What did you get?" And I said, $350. "Oh, it's a shame you didn't make budget. Nobody else made budget. You were the best of the lot." And I said, "What are you talking about, Roger? I wrote 350% to budget." I wrote nearly $1,400. The guy's astounded. Guess who the top salesman was for the rest of that time?
Oh, I can't guess at all, Peter. Maybe you. And I also believe that, during that time there, you got into the International Hall of Fame with all your records that you were breaking in sales.
Listen, before I get to that, I think this part's important. What actually happened is I'm in the country in a town called Sale in Victoria, Sale. And my manager gets tracked down at the motel by the police. And he's now given a message to come back and see me at the police station. They locked me up because I missed where my call was. So I put the car in reverse, and I'm going faster in reverse than cars were going forward on the other side of the 2-lane highway. Right?
Oh, wow. Highway. Okay. Yep.
So the police wanted to know what I was doing. And I told them I'm working for the Yellow Pages. They didn't believe me because I didn't have a business card in those days. We just went out with contracts. So what happens? The manager turns up and they say, "Is this one of your guys?" And he says, "Yep." "What's he locked up for?" And they told him, he said, "Keep him in jail. I'm going to meet him back at the motel tomorrow." And the police said, no, we can't do that. Anyway, I kept on getting promoted because of the work that I was doing. I end up as a Tasmanian manager. So I've got about 5 promotions since in the next 2 years. And they give me a state which was a basket case financially. And they said, if you can pull this out of the mire, we'll look after you very well. Well, the first year I got in there and they gave me free rein to do whatever I wanted. I wrote an increase on last year's revenue for the whole state with my team at 30%. Or sorry, 40%. Now, that had never been done in a capital city anywhere in the world before. So we've now got revenues that other people can't relate to. And a lot of people and a lot of managers in Australia were saying, well, that was a fluke.
Oh, a fluke, right?
Yep. So the next year, I set another goal. And guess what my goal is? I'm going to increase revenue by 40%. Never been done for 2 years in a row because it's never been done before. And guess what I get at the end of that canvas?
40%.
Yep. On the third occasion, guess what? I set another goal. Now I've got my managing director flying out from Melbourne to Tasmania saying, Peter, you can't do it. You can't physically work that hard. Cut back your goal. And I said, Tony, thank you for the dinner. Thank you for the breakfast, because he stayed overnight. And I took him back to the airport, and guess what happened? At the end of that year, I got my 40% yet again. Now, at that time, I was working as a state manager for the Yellow Pages telephone directory. And there, my staff were the first to notice a change in me and how it affected my focus and also my selling. Now, even while working as a state manager, my personal sales had not only gone through the roof, but that momentum dragged the whole of my sales force behind me, with me. And as my figures increased, so did the state's profit margins, and the sales increase at never before heard of levels of 40% increase in revenue over last year's results. That was the first time any major Yellow Pages telephone directory had increased at that level in a capital city ever. But it was then followed by a further 40% increase on the previous year, and then followed by a further 40% increase on the next year as well. Unheard of? Yes, totally unheard of in the industry, but the figures cannot be changed today because they're a part of history now. I was lucky enough that 40% got me into the International Hall of Fame with the Yellow Pages for the very first time. But because I exceeded other percentages on top of that personally, I got into the Hall of Fame twice with that company.
Fantastic.
That's the corporate introduction. I go back into my own business, but by now I'm training a lot of people in sales. And you know what I did along the way? While I'm out there putting my own business together, I put out the first set of tapes called Over 50 Ways of Closing the Sale. At the time, I didn't know, but I created a world first. I was the first person in the world to put out audio tapes on closing the sale. Guess who the second person in the world was a year later, putting out a set of closing tapes, and that was a guy called Zig Ziglar. So I beat Zig Ziglar by a whole year with my closing tapes. Here's the other thing that happened. While I'm out there, I decided I'm going to go out on the road and I'm going to sell this product to businesses. And you know what happened while I was selling this product to businesses? I'm personally selling it and at the same time booking my seminars.
What a great strategy.
I ended up breaking another world record I wasn't aware of, where I sold 2,500 sets of closing the sale on the road.
Wow. 2,500.
And most of that was referrals. And I did that in an 18-month period. And in Melbourne, a lot of the time you had to go door knocking in a raincoat.
Yes.
Because it was raining. But despite all of the restrictions, still managed to make the sales. And from there, I did such a good job. There was an old guy that I'd known for many years, a guy called John Ocello, who decided he was going to headhunt me. And by headhunting me, he offered me a job or a position I couldn't refuse back in Sydney. So I've got this successful business. What do I do with it? I couldn't find a buyer.
Oh.
So what I did is I put it in mothballs because I knew the product would work its own way. And I ended up joining a company, a steam cleaning company. And that steam cleaning company was an offshoot, another multinational with an American company called Thermax. Now, everybody knows who Thermax is, but doesn't know the name. Whenever you walk into Coles or Woolworths, they've got this Britex steam cleaner.
Yes.
You hire that and do some steam cleaning. Well, that's the domestic version. I then joined the company, started domestically, and I said to the managing director, there's something wrong with what's going on here. I believe your biggest market's in the commercial side. So he keeps the domestic side going. Then we set up the commercial side. Get into the commercial side. For the next 5 years, we outright every record there is, not only in Australia, but internationally. We're talking about a multinational company. They keep flying me back to the States to keep selling their product, and I'm outselling the Americans at what they were doing.
That's incredible, Peter.
And one of the managers in America said, we know why you're selling so much, because you're an Australian.
Well, maybe, but no.
All these dumb things kept coming out, and it got to the point where after about 50 trips to the States over about 4 or 5 years, because I'm now losing business in Australia, I said, no more. We've got to stop this. I've got to look after Australia. So they sent a guy out from the States to come here and teach me how to sell.
Teach you how to sell, not you teach him.
Well, we get halfway through the call. He's opening his mouth. The poor old prospect's all confused. There's conversations going everywhere. Got to the point where I grabbed my foot. I had to look where his toes were, grabbed my foot, and the heel of my foot went straight into his toes as hard as I could.
Oh.
He stopped talking.
Yeah, I bet.
I think I saw the tears running down his eyes. And I said, thank you, John, whatever his name was. We get into the car and I said, you ever do that again, you'll be on the next plane back to the States. I don't care what the president says. He's been over to my place for dinner. I know the guy personally, but you're not going to get away with destroying our business here in Australia. You don't sell properly in America. Don't try to sell badly in Australia. The next call we go out on, guess what happened?
He kept quiet?
No. He'd opened his mouth again. I closed the call down. I said to the people, I apologize. I'll have to come back. I'm not feeling very well. We'll make another appointment. They agreed. And guess what happened? I take him straight back to head office. This is still during the day. Hand him over to my managing director. My managing director, what am I supposed to do with him? I said, send him back to the States. He's well, he's not a nice guy.
He's not helping the business here.
That's right. So guess what happened? They didn't send him back for 2 weeks. My managing director was too afraid of the backlash they'd get from America. So they allowed him to go out and watch. And then he would share the business being written. That guy was flabbergasted. He'd never seen selling at that level before with that product. You know what happened at one time? I was not only breaking records, and this is something that I never forget about, and a lot of people don't believe really happened. To sell 3 steam cleaners in a day is a big feat. And a number of people, probably 6 people around the world, managed to do that. And so did I. So now I've got the equal world record for the amount of steam cleaners sold in one day.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, I become the first guy in the world to sell 4 steam cleaners in a day. Now, to give you an idea at that level, we're talking corporate steam cleaners, and they can be very expensive.
Yeah.
Generally, you don't make the sale on the first call. A lot of the times, a lot of people would go back for a second and third call. It needs management intervention. And I would speak to the CEO and then present to the CEO on the basis that if you like what I do, give me a decision, a simple yes or no. So to get 4 sales in a day, usually about a 3-hour call,
Yes.
we're talking a gap in between. You could be working a 15 to 18-hour day to get 4 sold.
I bet. Yeah.
Within 2 years, I've now equaled that same record, believe it or not, 50 times.
I can believe that, Peter. Actually, I can. If there's anyone that's going to do it, it's you.
Thank you, Bianca. Now, I'm still the only guy in the world that has broken that record of 3 up to 4. That's 50 times. So at 50 times, we get a big celebration. Then I get up to 55 and eventually up to 60. And I get up to 60 and my managing director comes up to me and says, "You think you're a salesman?" The only salesman that I know that keeps setting records is the one that keeps breaking records. You've now equaled that record 60 times. When are you going to learn to sell? Walks away and leaves me stranded. This time I don't get a plaque. I don't get a certificate. I don't get a bonus check like I did for the 50. So within 2 weeks, guess what happened? I became the only person in the world that managed to sell 5 steam cleaners in a day.
Congratulations, Peter. That's huge.
Thank you. And I'll tell you what, this is the best part. I also get into another International Hall of Fame, but this time not for the sales I made, but for my closing rate. Because for 2 years, I would close at 92% on average on the first call.
That's really unheard of, to be honest.
Is. Never happened anywhere else. Yep. Sorry.
No wonder you got that international hall. You were inducted into the International Hall of Fame.
Listen, I'm so grateful for your acknowledgement of all this, because it's one of the things that you do in life that you never forget and other people never forget as well. The interesting thing is, not only do I get into the Hall of Fame, but now I'm dragged back out of that company. And I ended up going to do some consulting for somebody and it didn't work out. So I go back into my own business and there I stay. And this is the interesting part. And you know what's going to happen next, because I've now worked for so long, for so hard, and I'm talking 7 days a week. I've gone through my second broken marriage because of it. And guess what? She liked the money, but didn't like me not being home. And out of the 5 years that we're in that I was working for that company, never once was I home for Christmas.
Oh.
It was a business. Steam cleaners relied on the hotel, motel, and other forms of business. And guess what the busiest period of the year is for those people?
Christmas.
And if something broke down or if something went wrong, you had to be out there in the field repairing it. And that's what happened. And then all of a sudden, 20 years ago, in 2001, I suffer something I didn't expect. Now, I'd had heart issues since I was 31 years old. So at that stage, over 30 years worth of heart problems, but now I get a massive stroke. That's something I want to share with people, because that put me on my back feet. I was actually in a place I'd never been to before. I'm paralyzed on the left-hand side. I get into the car, I can still drive with the right arm, but I pick up my left arm and I put it on my left knee. I can barely walk, I'm limping, and I am happy that I've got an automatic car and I can drive it with my right leg anyway. So that's how I went on. It took around about 4 years before I could get back into the workforce, and I took whatever job was available at that point. And what I did is I started working as a therapy consultant, selling therapy equipment. Now, the reason why I did that is I bought this therapy equipment for myself to help me with my recovery. They found out that I used to sell.
Of course they did.
And these people were always short of salespeople, because working in home with a very pricey product, and I'm talking about chairs and beds and other therapy equipment, Now, this is all TGA approved. It's the top of the range. But when you're selling chairs for $15,000 and beds for $20,000 upwards, and I'm talking 20 years ago, you're getting to ask people to spend a lot of money. And you needed a lot of finesse to be able to do that. So guess what happens there? I'm now converting at a higher rate than everybody else. My health isn't good all the way through. I worked there for 5 years. I probably never worked more than 3 days a week in that 5 years on average.
That was good. That's a big change for you.
Well, that's in and out of hospital. I ended up having a few more heart attacks during that time, I think because I pushed myself a bit hard. They kept on giving me stents.
Yeah.
Now I've got 7 of the buggers. But my heart still works.
Yeah.
But because you've had one stroke, as time goes on, you pick up a few more. So in between that, I've been working in between strokes and still doing things other people don't do. And currently, for the past 5 years, I've been videotaping.
Yes.
And you know how long I've spent videotaping. And I think at this stage, I've got about 1,500 videos on sales in reserve at all different levels, different lengths. But we've got, or I'm about to start sharing some of the stuff that I've been working on in the next few months, because now we're out of the pandemic. I'm able to do that. I'm also one of the guys that got jabbed with Pfizer and ended up in hospital for 10 days.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Of course you did.
I didn't need that, but it happened. And, you know, the worst part about that is in between all of that, I had to stop work on what I was doing. And all the plans that I'd made to release things and start projects about mid last year have now been put off. So in the next couple of months, you're going to see 4 different products from me. The first is you're going to see Take Your Business to the Next Level. This is a 6-week program where business owners can actually come on board and I'll teach them how to grow their business in a way they've never known before. Now, this is not a Jimmy come lately product that I've put together specifically for the pandemic. I started working on this 30 years ago.
Yeah.
When a guy started from Newcastle University, Alan Williams is his name, Professor Alan Williams, told me about this process that he'd put together. And he was the guy at that stage I made contact with because he was the first guy in Australia to talk about how quickly businesses go under. And what he shared in those days was within 12 months, 50% of all business houses that are startup business houses will close up. Within 2 years, 75% will go to the wall. And then eventually that goes to 5 years where 93% of all startup businesses will go to the wall. So I'm talking to him face to face over a coffee about this one issue. And he says, but Peter, they missed the mark. We're talking to the media. They just want bad news stories. I had good news to give them and they wouldn't listen. And if they did listen, they wouldn't print it. And I said, what was the good news? He said, look, in my research, and I'm talking about 30,000 businesses I started researching over a 20-year period, of all of those people that went into business that did a small business or marketing course first, or a small business and marketing course 12 months after they went into business, 90% are still in business 10 years later or sold their business for a handsome profit.
That is such an incredible statistic, especially when you consider how many entrepreneurs we have these days. Like, you know, the last 5 to 10 years, there's so many people who have started their own business. And I think that, you know, that fail rate is still out there, but knowing that there is a series, like you've said, Take Your Business to the Next Level series to support you. And you've shown the flip of that statistic that if you do something like this, you'll probably still be in business 10 years down the road.
Bianca, I've put together a 350-page book called Take Your, you've seen it, Take Your Business to the Next Level. Now, that book is so unique. I've actually sold that book to a number of people and their business has increased. But I think there's too much to digest for somebody in business today. So to me, a 6-week program covering 12 different subjects over a 6-week period. And then they can have all the questions they want, because I'm going to keep this on a rotating basis. They will then learn much more. And from there, I'll get a lot of referrals from people that have grown their business, and that will help other people move to the next level. The second project that I've been working on is mindset in selling. Now, I've done so much work on mindset in selling over the last 5 years, it'll blow people out of the water. And I had one person that wanted to coach me on that, and I led him for a while, and then we had...
We know what happened there.
We had a falling out. And what then happened is the mindset in selling was actually stopped at that point. I went back about 3 months ago and started looking at the videos that I'd cut, about 8 hours at that point of videos. And I'm thinking, this is radical stuff. This is good stuff. This is stuff everybody in sales should have. So in a few months, I'll have done enough work to actually launch that as well. I'm just falling behind on the workbook. Now, the third project is advanced goal setting. Thank you, Bianca. And with that, I do mindset creation at a level people haven't seen. In fact, I bring in the law of attraction again at a level people haven't seen, because I go back more than 40 years since I started studying the law of attraction, nearly as long as I've been studying selling. And I'm at a church at that point, and I meet with a guy that's come from America, one of the most incredible Bible teachers in America, and he's now the pastor of the church that I'm at. And I got to meet with him on a weekly basis. I'm one of the few guys allowed that, because I've got an inquisitive mind. I've got a million questions, and got to the point nobody else wanted to talk to me, so they put me onto the pastor. And now he's giving me an hour a week, which is absolutely out of this world. And I asked him about the law of attraction, because at that stage I only heard about Bob Proctor talking about the law of attraction. And you know what he said? What do you want to know? I said, what do you mean? Go to the Bible. I'll give you 200 scriptures on the law of attraction straight away. And I'm going, what? This is 40 years ago. This is mind-blowing. I'm new to the Bible, but I tell you what, it didn't take long for me to start literally turning the pages brown.
Yeah, I bet.
Creased, and I'm just going through it over and over. And I turned up with over 500 scriptures of my own on the law of attraction. But I can tell you things about the Bible as well. The biggest subject that they teach on outside of God, the Bible teaches finance.
Right.
2,700 scriptures on finance, goal setting, and everything associated with it. It is the largest one subject. And in fact, if you go back to the Gospels, the teaching of Jesus, 15% of every word that came out of his mouth that turned up in the Gospels talks about finance, the law of attraction, everything that we need for business today. So that is something that everybody in sales should get hold of. And I talk about setting goals, not only at the normal level, but I show people how some friends of mine set goals to earn $1 million a year in commission.
Yeah.
And that's in today's mark. And you know what? I use the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill in order to share that information, because Napoleon Hill did more on goal setting than just about anybody else in the last 100 years. And he did it brilliantly, but he gave us some ideas on how we should work with it. And this goes back to the 1920s. And he says you should set a goal as a salesperson for $50,000 a year. Hello, back in the 1920s, they were lucky to be earning $1,500 a year.
Yeah.
US. He's saying set a goal for 50,000. If you equate that back to today's figures, what he's really talking about, most people in sales don't believe, because he's talking about you setting a goal for $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Hello. Now, you might have to take some expenses out of that.
Yeah.
But who today, and this is US numbers, so when we talk Australian numbers, we're talking over 2 million. Who
Yes.
today sets a goal for more than $100,000 or $200,000 in sales?
Not many people.
I physically show people how to move from one to another. So if you can get from $100,000 this year to say $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in your commission or income in 2, 3, 4 years from now, what would that do to your life? How would it change it? And Bianca, you know me, have known me long enough to know I don't gild a lily.
No.
I tell things as straight as I possibly can. And
that's something I really respect about you, is like, you know, you're not going to sugarcoat things. You tell it as it is and how to do it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that comment, Bianca. Look, the important thing is I've achieved a lot in nearly 60 years in sales. I've done most of what I've achieved in the most adverse of conditions. I've had so many health issues people just don't know about. I've been restricted from selling because of those health issues time and time again. And even when I was well, I used to sneak off and take time out. You know, by the time I got that third 40% increase with the yellow pages, I suffered my first heart attack. I'm 31 years old. I'm now in hospital for a week and a half. My staff turns up for about the fourth time, and I'm talking about quite a few people turn up at the hospital. They used to hate it because they'd take up not only my bed, but they'd swamp a couple of other beds in the ward that I was in. And you know what happened? I'm now walking out of the hospital. They're coming in. And they're saying, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. I said, you don't look alive. You're grey. You shouldn't be.
So don't mean to laugh, but yeah, I know you. So that kind of behavior you would do. Yeah.
Thank you, Bianca. I didn't need to hear that. But you know what happened after that? I go home. I'm running the office from my home bed. I should have been in hospital, but no, I can't get up to go to work. So I'm on the phone all the time. That didn't help my recovery either.
No.
Meanwhile, my managing director finds out about the fact that I'm in hospital. This is the same guy that kept on promoting me while I'm in the yellow pages right at the very beginning to the state manager. He's now the big manager all around Australia. So he rings me and says, what's going on? Oh, mate, I'm not feeling too well. You haven't been at work for 4 weeks.
Yep, it's called a heart attack.
But the numbers are still there, aren't they? And he says, yeah. Well, what are you making the phone call for?
Exactly.
And he said, you win. And that was the interesting thing. Now, I'll just give you an idea. That guy's name was Tony Knight. Tony is the best mentor I think I've ever had. I actually started making a list of all my mentors, and in my time, I've now had a total of 7 mentors. Tony would have to be the best one. 7 mentors in 60 years, that's pretty good.
That's really good, yeah.
And I've got one advisor now that I've had for 30 years, which is a very good friend of mine as well. He's my accountant.
Yeah.
And when I get it wrong, I think his shoe is about a size 15. And it hurts.
Yeah.
You're not quite there yet, Bianca, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
The most important thing with this, what I'm now putting together, is something unique. Every one of my projects, nobody's ever done before, not at the level that I'm providing and not with the information I'm providing. Because of my age, it's boots and all. No holds barred. If
Brilliant.
you want to know 100% of what you need to know, then go to my material. If you just want to buy it because you think by buying it, you're going to sell more, don't bother. It's not going to work for you. And yet so many people in sales for so many decades have been buying stuff for the sake of buying stuff, never get to use more than 10% of what they buy, and then say, all this training stuff is useless. It doesn't help me. The people, on the other hand, that buy it with a pen and paper in hand and a goal to achieve whatever information they can or they can glean from that one tape series actually do something with their lives. But here's the other thing. Most training programs by the big trainers, and I'm talking about people that have been doing it for decade after decade, will last 3 or 4 hours. The material that I'm providing, I don't think any of it's going to be under 10 hours, possibly the best part of 15 hours, with a workbook that looks like a telephone directory. And I know full well, and you've seen what the workbooks look like.
I have.
You know full well that when you buy something from me, you're getting 100% of what I can give you, because there isn't too much time left for me to keep on providing this. The hardest thing for me to do is to find the time to record it all. It's phenomenal. And it's happening. So from that, there's a lot that you can learn. And from that, there's a lot that I'm grateful for the people that have guided me now over the past nearly 60 years. And Bianca, I'm grateful for you for all the work that you've done, especially all of the listening that you've done. And again, today, guess what you've done mostly?
Listened. Because you're interesting to listen to. I mean, I've heard snippets of these stories, but, you know, I haven't heard it all put together in the way that you've shared today, like the whole journey. And I really was sitting back here enjoying the journey. So, you know, thank you so much for sharing with us. Like, you are an incredible man with incredible knowledge. You've got a brilliant sense of humor. As I said, your knowledge around sales is like top level up there. And I love the fact that, you know, you call it as it is. That's something that's really key to me as well. It's like, it's about being honest, and let's get rid of all the fluff and the fancy bits. You know, if you want results, you have to put in the effort, and you have the knowledge there for those who are ready to step up and ready to put the effort because they really want to transform their lives. Then all they have to do is just, you know, follow what you're sharing with them and apply it.
Bianca, thank you very much for that summary. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate everything you've done to help me along the way. That
it's been my absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, that too needs to go acknowledged fully.
Thank you, Peter. I accept it.
God bless. Bye now.
God bless. Bye.
Now, I want to purposely put a footnote to this interview, and I want to say, Bianca, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for bringing out the best in me in this interview. And the most important thing, thank you for having fun with me. I had fun in every part of what we did. In fact, one of the things I just want to pass on to other people that are interviewing people, you bring out the best in people because, as I said in the interview at the beginning and at the end, you listen. And very few interviewers are capable of listening well and then understanding when to respond. You do that brilliantly. You've done that brilliantly. It was like as if we were having lunch somewhere and you wanted to ask me about a few things that I was working on, and I'd start explaining it to you. You would listen there, and you listened on this interview as well. So what I've done is I've pulled out a unique bottle of red wine. Now, as you know, I like my red, and I know that you like a good red as well. So here's the bottle that both of us are celebrating with. It's a Leasingham Clare Valley Cabernet Malbec 2000. Now, it's a bin 56, which means it's a unique blend of two different lots of casks. So firstly, it was matured in a French oak cask, and it was finished off in an American oak cask. Now, I'm not sure how long those oak casks, well, the actual maturation was in the oak casks, but it feels like it was good because you can actually feel and taste the oak. And that's something that I like in my red wine. So to you, Bianca, one nice glass of red wine. Look at the colour. So dark, so beautiful, but that's got to have something to do with maturing now for 21 years. This is a 2000 drop. Now, it's from the Clare Valley. For those of you that are not from Australia, and a lot of people in Australia won't know this either, Adelaide is one of the southern states, and it's one of the capitals in the southern state. And with Adelaide, there's two massive wineries, one south of Adelaide, which is the Barossa Valley, and the other one which is north of Adelaide, which is the Clare Valley. And this is from the Clare Valley. So it's a slightly different taste to what you get from the Barossa, but the one thing I can say, it's superb and it's worthy of the interview. Cheers, Bianca. It's beautiful. Absolutely superb, and what a taste. Just like the interview, that was superb as well. So thanks again. I look forward to another time that we can spend some time together, because in this interview I don't think I shared a quarter of my past because of time constrictions. So there's still a lot more that I can share with you, and we can all have a fun with, and we can get to know each other more along the way. Thank you again. God bless.